I'm Lily, and I'm the founder and CEO of Auggie. And one of my favorite parts of this job is getting to moderate conversations like this, especially with experts like Dr. M and Kary, who truly shape how parents are navigating big milestones like starting solids. Very exciting. If you like conversations like this, you can actually be in my seat. Parents from our community moderate virtual events every day with top experts. So if that's something you're curious about, just shoot us a note at hi@augie.com. I'll put that in the chat. And then just very quickly, and we will dive into what we're here for. But Augie is the most trusted community for parents to, one, find vetted providers, two, learn from experts like the two you have in front of you right now, and then share real recommendations in our digital community. So that's Augie. Now let's dive in. Dr. M, why don't you introduce yourself and then Kary will go to you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I look like I'm muted, but I'm on two devices, so sorry. My name is Manasa Mantravadi, and I'm actually a pediatrician by training. And really, in my career, I specialize in pediatric endocrinology, so specifically studying kind of hormones and hormone health for children. And then a few years ago, 5 years ago, I launched a company called Ahimsa, which is a line of stainless steel dishes for kids, really because there was so much endocrine disrupting chemicals in kind of our food system. And so that's what led me to say, okay, I'm seeing all these conditions in clinic. Let me see how I can be more preventative, upstream to help parents kind of create healthy eating habits at an early age to prevent a lot of what we see downstream later on. So I kind of wear two hats now, still a pediatrician, still now a founder of a company.
Female founder, no big deal.
Female.
You're just, and
But
how many kids?
I was gonna say most important hat is mom. So I have three kids. I've got twins who are 12, boy girl twins, and then a 9-year old very feisty daughter. So that's me.
So three kids, a company, and a pediatrician making it look easy. Kary, you too. I
Yeah,
mean,
seriously,
doing it
no big
all.
deal. She's just doing it all.
You too, though.
Yeah, kind of. Not three. That's hard.
That's right.
I'm Kary Rappaport. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist by training. I have been working with families, especially focused on infant feeding, eating, and swallowing for the past 20 plus years. I've worked in pretty much every setting you can think of that pertains to infant feeding, eating, and swallowing. I worked for a decade at Children's Hospital Los Angeles in their NICU. I have worked outpatient. I have worked inpatient. I have worked in schools. I have worked in primary care. I've kind of done it all. I've also worked with a lot of families who have typically developing kids on starting solids, just who were having some difficulty or were nervous to get started, and have focused the vast majority of my career on starting solids and preventing picky eating and helping kids learn to eat. I'm also an international board certified lactation consultant, and I am one of the primary feeding therapists who founded Solid Starts and has helped to create all the content that you can find on the Solid Starts app and website and Instagram page. I also have two children, not three. Three is a lot.
Three is a lot.
Well, I have kind of a bonus kid, I guess. So my partner has a kid, so maybe you're
That's
right.
fun.
Maybe there are three, but they're older now. I have a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old. So
So
we've
you
been through
both
a lot.
can tell us it does get easier, right?
Oh, I mean, it gets easier until it gets harder, girl.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to say, whoever said parenting gets easier is lying. It's just all you're doing is you're changing a different challenge. And not just with feeding, right? Whether it's sleep, you just change out a different
Everything.
challenge for,
Attitude.
exactly.
All right, well, let's start with this challenge, which is starting solids. And I forgot if I mentioned this, but I have a 4-month-old, so I'm right there with all of you. And I'm so excited to relearn this information. Every time we host this event, I learn something new. So where we'll start is just how do parents know when their baby is actually ready to start solids? And maybe, Kary, you'll
Mhm.
kick us off with the developmental side of that.
Yeah, totally. So exactly, rather than looking for a specific age, what we are really looking for are a set of developmental skills that show you that baby is ready to participate in the act of starting solids. Somebody's not muted out there. I can hear
Yeah, I'm muting them.
Okay. So the it's primarily three skills that we're looking for baby to show that kind of shows you that they're ready. The three skills are that baby can sit up with pretty good
Hmm.
support. Doesn't have to be perfect. Your baby can be a little wobbly. Honestly, Lily, at 4 months old, you probably, if you put your baby in sitting, they'll like wobble a little bit,
Yeah,
maybe
it's like
pop a bit.
that turned up, whatever they're called.
Totally. And they'll use their hands to keep themselves upright at that age, which is totally normal, but it tells you they're not quite ready for starting solids because the one of the next steps is you have to be able to reach out, grab things, and bring
Yeah.
it to your mouth. So that's kind of important. Once they have really good head, neck, and trunk control for sitting, they'll be able to use those hands more flexibly to reach out and grab things. You actually see them rotating. Oh, I just hit the table, rotating through their trunk a little bit more. They move more flexibly in sitting. All of that tells you their sitting control is getting strong enough that they can now reach out and grab food, pick it up, explore, bring things to their mouth. And the third piece of that is interest, which usually
Yep.
follows when those two things are in place. So now you have a baby who comes to the table at 4 months old and is, interested in the adults. They're interested in what you're doing, generally speaking, but usually closer to 5 and 6 months, they become very interested in the food and really interested in the act of the food moving from the plate to your mouth and in what's happening. So rather than just sort of smiling and babbling at you as their parent, they suddenly are actively interested in the activity. And if you put something in front of them, like some food, they're very apt to reach out and grab it and try to start exploring it. So
And
that
is
tells
it
you
smell based? Like, what is causing that interest in food?
it is just a mix of the brain wiring for it at that age. They're very interested in exploring with their mouth and putting things in their mouth. So it's actually not necessarily food based. It's
Hmm.
that they are driven to pick things up and bring it to their mouth to explore them because there's so many sensory receptors in the mouth. That's how they take in sensory information and learn. So it's actually kind of a not food related that tends to drive that active interest. And it's a mix of like social reciprocity. They're much more,
Watching.
yeah, communicative and interested in what's happening around them, and their vision is improved to the point that they can see what's happening around them. So it's kind of a confluence of things coming together all at once. But that's oh, and people often ask about gut readiness, and maybe you want to talk
Oh,
about this, Manasa, but like that for me, the research seems to suggest that it underpins the fact that the gut is starting to be more ready for solids at that age as well. We can't
hmm.
look at a baby and say, oh, their gut's ready today, or oh, tomorrow their gut is ready. But what we know is that around 6 months old, those sets of skills suggest that they have the gut readiness to handle solids as well.
Got it. So, Dr. M, can you just reassure us that it's not about the calendar and really is about the milestone? Because I feel like there's so much anxiety, both warranted and not, around this topic. Yep.
Here, on this side, it's like,
Device
oh,
two.
I feel
Yeah.
like a weather woman. It's like when they do the meteorologist stuff. I'm
We
like,
can switch your background next time.
what I always like to say, and I think we talk about this a lot on these, what we used to think versus what we know now. So, number one is we used to think there was a certain age, right? Somewhere between 4 to 6 months that's when you should introduce solids because of their weight gain, because they're developmentally appropriate. But it's those skill based things that Kary just said. Like that's how we actually know that they're ready. So for some babies, it might be 4 months, and some babies it might be 6 months, and some babies it might be a little bit later. So what I love to reassure parents about, everything is on a curve.
Okay.
And really that curve, whether it's growth, whether it's milestones, is pretty normal. And so as long as your baby is kind of fitting into that normal curve, we really don't worry.
Okay.
So again, when that baby starts, it doesn't really matter. It's really more that they're hitting those skills. Um, and so I think, again, if you have a pediatrician who maybe is, practicing from like before all of these new guidelines came out, I think one of the things that's really important to have is a kind of a two-way conversation with your provider. Because I hear that a lot. Oh, well, they told me to do it at exactly this, and we'll talk about spoon feeding versus baby led weaning. There's a lot of new research out here that is validating kind of newer and older techniques. And so
Yeah.
not sticking to necessarily one thing, or not sticking necessarily to the one thing that grandma said or specifically the pediatrician said, or an influencer said, really understanding kind of what is in the realm of normal, what is the most recent science, and what is most comfortable to you as the parent of this child. I think that's like the most
Yep.
reassuring thing I can provide for everyone.
Yeah. So don't compare yourselves and really look out for those signs that Kary mentioned because those are your baby telling you that they're ready.
That's right.
Okay, Kary, let's kick it off with you. Just a quick overview of baby-led weaning and purees, and then let's add in, just because I see it in the chat, will your baby get confused if you do both purees and baby-led weaning?
Question. Yeah, so when it comes to how we start solids, the approaches are the pureed approach, or some people call it traditional approach, and baby-led weaning is sort of the other big approach. And then there's a combo approach of like sort of both mixed together. So the traditional approach or the pureed approach or spoon feeding approach was pretty much all there was before. Dr. Em and I,
Yeah.
she said, we talk about this a lot, kind of what we used to do and what we know now. That was the go-to approach for like the last 100 years. It's not to say it was always that way. Actually, if you go back way further than that, baby-led weaning and the elements that we do now with that approach are actually more similar to what we used to do prior to spoon feeding and
Yeah.
purees and things like that. So purees and spoon feeding basically follows a gradual approach where you start with usually something that's pretty thin and watery that resembles breast milk or formula, and then you slowly, gradually increase in thickness over time to something a little thicker and a little thicker and then a little lumpier and then a little bumpier and mashed, and eventually you get to finger foods. And usually you start with smaller pieces.
And that's why you see on the jars like those numbers, right? That
Exactly. Yeah.
say, okay,
Stage 1,
yep,
stage 2, exactly.
Right.
exactly.
So that is an approach. Again, it's what we used to do. So it's not to say that that approach is, I'm not going to say that that approach is necessarily wrong, but what we know now is that there's actually not a lot of research that underpins that approach.
Yep.
So that approach makes some sense if you're just thinking, yeah, of course, like if you're trying to learn how to manage something in your mouth, it makes sense to start with a pureed texture that's similar to milk because babies know how to handle milk and then move up from there. So it makes some sense, but it's not based in research. And what we have found is over the past really 10 years, as more research has emerged, is that babies aren't really learning to chew when we give them purees. They're learning how to swallow those things. They're learning a lot about texture and about flavors and things like that, but they're not learning the skills of chewing. You actually need chewable food to trigger chewing reflexes to learn how to chew. And the research has become really strong on this over the past, like I said, around 10 years, that somewhere between 6 and 9 months, baby has a set of chewing reflexes that are available to them that actually will lessen over time that help them learn how to chew if we give them chewable foods. So the food is important. So baby-led weaning basically capitalizes on that, tells us that around 6 months old, baby is ready to start exploring chewable foods. They can pick it up, they can bring it to their mouth and explore it so that you actually can skip the baby food phase. You can skip the stage 1, stage 2, stage 3s if you want and go straight into finger foods. That's not to say that you would skip purees because that is a texture that exists in the world. We all eat soups and sauces and things like that. I love guacamole. I love soups. So you would want to serve purees to baby as well, but you're letting baby feed themselves by using their hands to reach out and grab it, to explore it, to hold the spoon, and you're introducing a wider variety of textures right from the start.
And then just a follow-up to that, what happens, and I see it in the chat here, and I have this question as well. A 6-month-old already has teeth. Should we be worried they can bite something off and potentially choke on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if 6 months old, if you have teeth, that is a very likely outcome. They will bite something off. That's exactly what we expect to happen. That's what we want to happen.
Okay.
As baby bites off a piece of food, not only do they have chewing reflexes, which help them learn to mash and chew the food, they have a set of what we call protective mechanisms in place that help to keep them safe as they learn to chew. Those are what start to actually fade out after around 9 months old. It's not that they're gone. I saw somebody say something about their 10-month-old has not done a lot and they're worried they haven't done enough. So if your baby is older than 9 months, all is not lost. There's still plenty of time, but the window is strongest between 6 and 9 months based on the research, and it starts to get a little bit more challenging for baby to learn after that time. So those protective mechanisms help baby keep the food really far forward in the mouth as they learn to chew. and it helps them spit out pieces of food that aren't successfully chewed so that they don't end up choking on those pieces of
Yeah.
food. And one of the big protective mechanisms is actually the swallow reflex, which is a really strong reflex in babies, so that if food does make its way back, baby is very, very, very likely to swallow it, not to choke on it.
And Dr. M, does the gagging happen both if you're doing purees and baby-led weaning? Does it matter? And can you talk to us a little bit about like what sounds are normal versus when you potentially should be worried?
Yeah, that's actually a good question for Kary, just in
I was
terms of,
gonna say Kary, but I
yeah,
felt
because
like I
only
pinged her
because
too.
yeah, like very specific. And I want to like, I think that's an important aspect of starting solids, because I think a lot of people, when they think about starting solids, you're talking to your pediatrician. It's like a developmental milestone you think you need to hit. You think it's for nutrition. We'll talk about that later after this,
Yep.
and what it really is for. And so I think it's really important to understand all of these conversations that Kary is talking about as occupational therapist is really in kind of physical motor practice, all of the things that we're talking about with the choking and the gagging and like the consistency. It really is a lot of these mechanics. And so
Yep.
I think a lot of people get concerned about nutrition and calories and growth, and we'll get to that. But I think this highlights like her expertise of knowledge on really helping baby learn this very specific skill set, and kind of the physics behind the choking, the gagging with these different things. So if you want to talk about purees versus baby led weaning with those, Kary, in your experience of all of these children that you got.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I love that you put it like that. That is exactly what it is. It is a set of skills that baby is learning. So if you think about baby learning to crawl or baby learning to walk, it's the same thing. It's just a constellation of skills that they're putting together to do a more complex motor pattern. Chewing is the same thing. It doesn't really seem complex to us because as adults, we've been doing it our whole lives. And it's second nature. But the act of chewing, of breaking down a piece of food fully, and then knowing that it's fully broken down and safe to swallow, and keeping it all together in a little package so it's not just spread around the mouth and sticking everywhere, and then slowly moving that back to get it into the right spot to then swallow it is complex. It's actually really challenging for a baby who has only done that with liquid, with milk. And with
Yeah.
milk, it comes straight in and it goes back and we swallow. That's it. With chewing, the first thing we do is bring it over to the side, and then we have to do all this action with the tongue and the cheek and the palate to keep it all together, and we have to mix in saliva. There's a lot of things going on. So it is really a skill set that baby is learning.
I
And
love that. And I feel like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to
oh,
interrupt
go
you.
ahead.
Continue. No, I was going to say the visual of it being a skill that needs to be learned just almost made me take a deep breath, because it's like you're not going to run before you learn how to walk. And so you really do need to learn how to chew. And it leads me to a question that came in. Somebody said, my baby is 14 months, but he tends to spit up proteins like boiled chicken, beef, etc., even when he had thoroughly chewed. And so she's wondering if he's getting tired from chewing. And Kary, I'm wondering, is he just still learning to chew? And that's normal.
That's exactly, yeah. So it can, especially meats and things that are really resistive, those are hard to chew. They take a lot of coordination and endurance. So it is so common for a baby or a toddler to get going and get started and then lose their energy and their coordination as they get more fatigued and then just spit it out. So it's really gross. But one of the strategies that we use in therapy when that happens is to pick up the food and examine it with the kid. Be like, oh, yeah, that doesn't look like it's chewed enough. And then if they're
Mm.
willing, a lot of toddlers will just simply put it back in their mouth and then keep going and being like, we're going to give it 10 more big chews and then we'll see what happens. Because
Oh, I
as
love
it gets
that.
fully broken down, they're more apt to move it back to swallow it. So if you're seeing a lot of that spitting, smaller pieces, a little bit of liquid mixed in, but really talking about how many times we have to chew a food can be helpful.
Yeah, it's interesting because it really is, between 4 months and 10 months, the baby is so different. So what they can understand at 10 months or older, you really can start to articulate things like that. Do teether snacks help a baby learn how to chew?
They are meltable teether snacks are not necessarily bad at helping baby to chew. They're not as effective as some other types of foods that actually do more to help elicit chewing reflexes. So I
Got it.
wouldn't call them bad. They're perfectly fine to use. They're just not my go-to as a feeding therapist for helping elicit chewing skills. We actually like more resistive food. We call them food teethers. So things like a mango with all of the fruit flesh cut away
Mm,
from the pit gives a really nice amount of resistance. So when it comes to building those skills in the mouth, a lot of sensory input is better than a little amount of sensory input. So food that melts away in the mouth doesn't really give baby a good sense of what they're doing with it. They chew it a little bit and then it starts to melt and they're like, "Oh, okay, I guess that was good. It's gone." We want baby to know that where that food is. We want to give lots of input to baby's brain to be like, "Here it is, move it there. This is what's happening with it." So
mm.
more resistive foods, bigger pieces of food are actually more effective at doing that.
And I think too,
Cool.
to kind of set, I think a lot of people kind of like you were just saying, Lily, it's like, oh, what do I feed and what do I, and a lot of times we get so caught up in all of these little things, it can feel overwhelming, especially if you're a first time parent and you're
Yeah.
like, oh my God, I gotta feed this kid, So like first it's breast milk and formula, and then you got to introduce these new solids. And so I think one of the things to remember, I tell all new parents this: number one, we've been raising children for
Very long
generations,
time.
well before lots of this medical technology, well before social media, well before, and guess what, like it really is in general fine.
Yeah.
And again, whether it's purees or baby led weaning, to Kary's point, there's a lot of cultures around the world, like it's natural to just do baby led weaning, because that is like the natural thing to do,
Yeah.
is to cook food or prepare food for your family and give your baby some of it. And so I think one thing that I always want to make sure, I hear this a lot, and Kary, I don't know about you, but parents are so concerned about what to feed their baby and growing them. And I think like a lot of people really think through, I have to give my child certain amounts of foods to make sure that they grow, or it's like an indictment on me as a
Yeah.
parent. And
You're
that's,
getting some amens in the chat. So I
yes.
think that's definitely relatable.
Yes. And I think that once you actually understand that starting solids is everything, is really a skill building phase, you can just all breathe.
Mm,
Because I think for all the reasons that Kary has pointed out, what to look for baby is ready, and what skills they actually develop to chew and swallow and all of these, it's just practice. Like these are
yeah.
skills. And so when people actually hear that the first year of life is for nutrition is really formula or breast milk, suddenly you feel like, oh, okay, so they're getting the calories from that, and this is all kind of play and practice. That is a very different mindset and very different pressure that you kind of put on
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really important one. First year of life, caloric intake and nutrition really comes from breast milk and formula.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like we'll definitely put that in the in the email following this event because it's so key. I actually have this question that I see in the chat as well, and I forget. So I have a 4-year-old and now I have a 4-month-old, and trust me, even though I'm not a first-time mom, I feel confused. So, do we feed breast milk or formula before offering to start solids? Like, should they, I know you just said they shouldn't be getting nutrients and calories from the food, but what's the best order of operations there?
There's no perfect way to do this, or there's no one singular way to do this. But what I said before about baby exploring the food like a toy gives us that clue that baby shouldn't really be hungry when they get to the table because they don't understand yet that this is food that's going to fill their belly. So it's a reasonable practice to give baby a bottle or a breastfeed around 30 to 90 minutes. You have a nice big window there of time before they come to the table. If your baby tends to eat every 90 minutes, then you'd probably go more for the 30 minutes. You want them to come to the table not particularly hungry so that they aren't motivated by hunger to explore the food. They're just motivated by being curious about it to explore the food. For babies that tend to be really gaggy, who might actually throw up an entire milk feed if they get a big gag going, you wanted to space it out a little bit more. So that's where
Yeah.
the 60 to then 90 minutes might be more effective for a baby who tends to be really refluxy, might be a really, like happy spitter type of baby.
Yeah.
And that can depend baby to baby, right? Just because if you're a second time parent, your first was different, it
Oh
doesn't
yeah.
matter. Because my first was very spit uppy and my second just isn't.
Yes. Every baby is so different.
Yeah.
And I will say too, I think there was one in the chat too about because this kind of goes along with, hunger cues and whatnot. Open cup feeding. So like I saw, how do you introduce kind of open cup feeding, or how do you kind of get off of bottles? And so I have a strong opinion on just
Tell
what
us.
we do. And so I think introducing an open cup early is a great, again, developmental skill. It's a skill set, like exactly what Kary
It's
was.
learned.
Exactly. It's like you're bringing the cup to the mouth and you can kind of slowly sip on it. So there's 2 points here. One, it's important for baby to get the breast milk or the formula first. So this also is a skill set that they're practicing, as opposed to consuming large amounts of water, which is not good for baby in general. But then also then they get full off this fluid and won't actually take the calories that they need from breast milk and formula. And why I think I feel very strongly about open cup feeding kind of at a younger age is we do see children who are on bottles well past kind of,
Yes.
and so,
What is well past?
well, Kary, I don't know what you consider well past as an occupational therapist. I know you're supposed to try like in terms of AAP around the 1 year mark, but I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, exactly. So it depends on who you're asking. The AAP does recommend it earlier, but I think from my perspective, it's about function and it's about how often you're using it. So it's not just the AAP, it's also a matter of your dental health, your like
Yep.
cavity risk and the way your palate is shaping at that point. So
Yeah.
ideally, you want to wean off the bottle, in my opinion, and that's just it, opinion, somewhere but in that 12 to 24-month range, because the bottle
Yep.
still has a lot of like soothing benefits, just like breastfeeding.
Yes.
You're using those moments to cuddle and to hold baby. So feeding with a bottle once or twice a day from 12 to 24 months is not the end of the world. If you're doing 8 feeds a day with a bottle during that
Yeah.
phase, that is a lot of feeds and you're risking baby's dental health and the shape of their face by doing lots of that. So at that point, I'm like, yeah, it makes sense to wean off a bottle at 12 months if you can. But if you're just using it for a couple feeds a day for comfort, I think it's a perfectly reasonable practice to keep it going through around 24 months, 18.
That's
Right.
right. Frequency and then also behavior patterns like, falling asleep with the bottle overnight, things of those sort that really increase the dental cavity.
Yeah.
So, but it just like starting solids, introducing that open cup kind of early also allows you to have that skill set. So baby can make that transition. Because again, you can't just expect a baby to suddenly learn how to use an open cup. So it's, we did it for my kids very young because in India, that's what you do. And so my
Yeah.
very strong-willed Indian mother is like, okay, we're going to do this early. And you know what? They really did learn pretty
They
quickly.
really do.
Great. Thank you, Mom.
Yes.
It's such a funny
Be-
thing. We like learned so many things when I was in school and then post school about feeding in terms of when babies develop certain milestones. Like, oh, cup drinking, that's a 18-month skill. The straw drinking, that's a 24-month skill. What I have found in my 20 years of practice is that it's very much dependent on when you introduce it. So
Yeah.
if you introduce open cup at 6 months and you keep practicing, a lot of babies have got it by 12 months. If
Yeah.
you wait until 12 months to introduce it, then yeah, it's an 18 to 24-month skill.
and that's okay. That's okay.
Which is also okay.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Got it.
Exactly.
Okay. So because you brought up water, Dr. M, there was a question earlier I want to get to. How do you introduce drinking water and when?
So I like to do it somewhere around the 4 to 6 months, kind of around the same time, because it kind of, I think about it as a package, starting solids and also open cup drinking.
Got it.
And so, but the key is again, so at Ahimsa, if you go to our website, we have these small little cups that are 4 ounce cups for babies specifically, so they can kind of really get their hand around it.
I
And
just ordered one.
no, you did. And the key is just to put a little bit of water. Kary, you can tell if you have any other tips, but just a little bit of water, like just an ounce or so, and you can kind of fill it up and then actually practice with baby. They'll naturally bring it to their mouth because, again, it is a developmental milestone. They're exploring the world with their mouth. And so you kind of can help guide that 1 ounce. And they're just really just taking sips. Those first few times, they might be a little startled by it, and you can kind
Yeah.
of help do it. And so again, it's not because you're giving them a whole cup of water and you're doing it before a feed to make them full. You want to just do the breastfeeder bottle feed first, and then after that you can practice along with your baby led weaning, a little bit of water and kind of bringing that to their mouth. Kary, I don't know if you have any other kind of very specific things on open cup, but I usually say small volume, and help guide. And then over time, they'll actually start to grab and reach and start doing it on their own.
Yeah, exactly. My three things are model for babies. So take a drink yourself and then hand it to them so they understand what they're supposed to do. Two, if you have a baby who's struggling, sometimes putting something thicker like a thinned out yogurt or something in there that will move slowly can help them to understand how to do it versus the water that's going to tilt back and douse them. And three, for a baby that's kind of struggling and kind of all over the place, sometimes putting a tiny bit of puree on the rim of the cup gives them an anchor to seal their lips on the
Oh,
Oh,
I like
a
that.
helpful way to get them doing it.
that's cool. Someone's asking, should the water be boiled beforehand? I guess that's dependent on where you live, right?
Yeah, I think so. But I think in general, yes, it depends. And I know there's actually a lot of international people on the
Yeah.
call too. So it really depends. So,
Okay. We won't touch that then.
yeah.
Do your own research on that. Somebody's reminding me in the chat, thank you, Vera, that Kary, we need to come back to the choking versus gagging
Oh,
question, if you don't
yes, that's an
mind.
important one.
It's an important one.
Yes.
Yeah, I was really on a roll there, just kind of all over the map with this stuff is my
I'm
favorite
trying
stuff.
my best to keep us on
I
our
appreciate
run of
it.
show, but I do love, leading the conversation where the questions go.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I love this topic, so I can kind of just go on a tangent, especially when it
Give
comes
us
to
your
skills and
wisdom.
skill development. So gagging is a normal natural response that we expect baby to do and we want baby to do. We all have a gag reflex. For adults, it's towards the back of our mouth. So when the posterior, the very back of our palate or tongue get touched, we're going to have a strong gag response. For a baby, it is much further forward. It's actually in the middle of the tongue and the palate, not that far back. So baby is going to gag. And when you see a gag, it looks like they're going to throw up. They open their
Yeah.
mouth. You usually see a nice wide O shape. The tongue tends to be cupped and they bring it forward like they're retching or they're going to throw up. It's not
Yeah.
just what's happening in the mouth, it's actually a set of things that are happening in the throat. So the throat itself is actually squeezing in a bottom to top motion so that anything that's back there is being pulled up and pushed back up and out. So that's why you tend to bring up stomach contents when you gag a bunch because it's pulling things from the bottom back out. Not only that, I think the most important part is that the airway is closing when you gag. So if you should throw up, the body doesn't want that throw up to end up in the airway. So it closes naturally for just a minute as you gag and then it opens back up. So that's really important for parents who are worried about choking because if baby is gagging, there's this feeling that baby is also choking or is going to choke because they're gagging. But the reality is, as your body moves to get that food out of the back of the throat or out of the back of the mouth, or for a baby, out of the middle of the mouth, the
Yeah.
airway is now closed so that something can't accidentally fall and get in there. So it's actually a really smart way for the body to move things up and out, but protect the airway at the same time. So gagging is normal. It's expected and it's protective against choking and it's a reflex. You don't have to teach baby how to do it, they just do it. Choking is not normal. It means that something bypassed all of those fail safes, which is why choking is so rare. Your body is designed to prevent against it. So
The mechanisms are in place.
exactly. A lot of things have to go wrong, and the research supports this. Choking is extremely rare in all humans, but it's very rare in babies too. It's something that happens. It's 1%. It's like 1% of deaths, unfortunately. It's very sad. No, all preventable deaths are not great, but it is a very small percentage compared to a lot of other things that we talk about and worry about with babies. So
We can worry about on another call.
exactly. And in terms of that 1%, more than half of those choking deaths are on non-food items. So we tend to really worry about choking
Yeah.
on food. The reality is baby is much more likely to choke on something that is not food, a Band-Aid, a little Lego, a Barbie shoe, the things that they're going to find on the floor and get into their mouth, a balloon, things like that. So choking is rare, but it is a medical emergency because non-food item choking is very common in terms of uncommon in general, but more common. We should all know choking rescue. Infant choking rescue is very effective at removing things when baby is choking. So we should all be ready for it. And we should act fast if you see baby choking, which means that they're silent
Yeah.
or wheezing. So you tend to hear a type of noise, which means they're having trouble getting air in and out, or silent. Versus gagging, you'll hear them breathing. They may cough, they may cry a little bit or fuss. All of those noises tell you air is flowing in and out. So gagging normal, choking is an emergency. We need to get baby out. We need to react fast.
Okay. And what about those devices? People are asking about them to have on hand at home. Dr. M, what do you think about those?
I actually have seen like good success. I think number one, first and foremost, is infant CPR. Really
Well, and call 911,
recognizing,
of course. Yeah.
yes, and just like knowing kind of like those basic life support skills, like as a parent, to be able to, administer that on your own without a device is
Yeah.
like the first and foremost thing. And I have had patients that have had like pretty good results with them. I've never
Okay.
use them. But I don't know if you, Kary, if you have any specific thoughts on those.
Yeah, our doctor and our allergist have done a deep dive on this one. So there's a couple of interesting things. One
Mhm.
is that the device is not approved for the infant size face. You have to be like 20 plus pounds.
Yeah.
It's actually like I'm sure what you're talking about is like in toddlers or older, that is actually I've also heard good stories that people
Yes.
really find it very effective, but you don't want to use it in a baby. So knowing your infant choking rescue is essential. You don't want to rely on a device like that.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
devices aren't recommended for that size baby. They also are not the first line of defense. So exactly like Dr. M said, you want to go to your infant choking rescue first. And if that fails, those devices would be the second step, but not the go-to. Everybody should be trained in infant choking, which is very effective at
Yeah.
removing.
And I know we're talking a lot about like these things. And I want to always, I think one of the biggest things that we can do as pediatric providers is provide reassurance, because that's so much of motherhood and fatherhood and parenthood, is feeling like, especially in the modern era where you feel like all of these different things you have to do. But by and large, the human
Yeah.
body is the most magnificent. It is like better than AI. It is better than any tech we can. It is literally designed to help grow your baby, to develop your baby, to protect your baby. So everything from breastfeeding, if you think about it, if you're a breastfeeding mother and your baby is crying from a different room, that your brain literally releases a hormone to release milk. That's crazy, right? That we
Insane.
know at this stage that baby has to be kind of sitting up and start exploring with their mouth. There's a reason, because we have to nourish ourselves at
Yep.
some point, and
Yep.
protecting our mechanisms with these reflexes. So I think when you can really think back through like how we got here and the like what the human body does, suddenly it just starts to feel less intense. And I think that's a big part of starting solids. I always say this on every call: food is health, food is love, food is joy. When you approach
Yeah.
starting solids and mealtime for your toddlers or your teens, when you approach it that way, suddenly it really does become an area of like a positive experience, which is, I would say, 90% of the battle with anything from starting solids and beyond.
I love that. It's so true. I worry that like these questions sometimes lead us down a path where people are like, oh my gosh, I got to take notes. And also like, this sounds terrifying.
Right.
We're born to do this. I
Yes.
have been doing this for 20 years, not only with typically developing babies, but with babies in the NICU and babies in the bone marrow transplant unit and across the different units of the hospital with very, very sick infants who are all very capable of learning these skills. Babies with Down syndrome, babies with cardiac defects. Babies are driven to learn these skills. The average typically developing baby is perfectly designed to be able to learn these things, and we don't have to worry about the things that we tend to really fret over. We just need to sit down with them and help them understand that being at the table is fun. And there's a term that I love that has always helped me understand this, is that babies are designed for what's called instinctive fumbling. So they learn how to do things through this instinctive drive to fumble through it. They're like, they just keep trying until they finally land on it. So we expect them to do that at the table. They're going to spit out food. They're going to drop food. They're going to throw food. They're going to gag on food. They'll cough it out. They'll mash it and swallow it whole sometimes. There's lots of things that happen as they instinctively fumble through the process until they figure it out.
I
Yeah.
like that. I feel like I need to take on instinctively fumbling in other
Yeah.
aspects
See,
of my
that's
life.
a skill set we lose as adults, right? Like
Exactly.
that's like why I love pediatrics, because kids are actually the smartest, coolest, kindest humans on the
It's
planet, really.
insane to watch. Honestly, just like observing my 4-year-old at the playground is the sweetest thing.
Yeah. And
When he's not pushing.
I wanted to piggyback on what Kary said about this kind of instinctive fumbling. I think the other thing again, I agree. Sometimes when we go down these, it's like, oh gosh, it feels really overwhelming. But really, and another thing to think about is, a lot of people worry about how much should I be feeding them? How much should they be? All of these milestones that honestly, I think providers like us probably put pressure on. And it's like the number one thing I tell my medical students. I'm like, please don't
Put
give
pressure.
this
Yeah.
just yes, because that makes the whole process harder. But I think one of the things to remember, again, like all of these instinctive reflexes, these natural things we do, intuitive eating and thirst are also part of that. So
Yep.
now we will always ask you, if you're concerned about my baby's not drinking enough, we'll ask you like, okay, how many wet diapers are they having? Are they crying with tears? Are there mucous membranes? Is their mouth like nice and moist? Or is it? So there are definitely things that we look for if baby's getting behind on fluids or in terms of growth. That's why you come to the pediatrician. We monitor that growth to say, okay, your nutritional caloric intake is enough, because guess what? Babies pretty much intuitively eat what their body needs. And so as long as they're kind of growing, it's all good. So I think that if
Yep.
everyone can kind of remember those things, like your baby will very unlikely dehydrate themselves unless they're sick and you do have to watch it, or starve themselves to not growing. Like it's just we are designed to do these things. We're designed to learn to eat. We're designed to sustain our, like normal human life. And so I feel like when people can realize that, like, okay, I can't screw this up that bad, right? Like
Quick two questions I think we can hit before switching gears to allergens, which is my baby loves food, which is obviously great. She's 7 months old. Uh, her breast milk intake is staying the same. Is there a thing of feeding her too much solids?
Um, Not really, if you're allowing baby to feed themselves. So babies usually are self-limited
Okay.
by the amount that they can pick up and feed themselves. They usually have a natural off button, just like Dr. M was saying. They have this intuitive ability to know that they're too full or that they are hungry and they should keep going. So less is more usually from us, even when we think it's too much. That said, if you are spoon feeding baby purees, you can sometimes override their off or go fast enough that they don't feel that they're getting too full before they get
Mm.
too full. So slowing down, letting them take the lead, letting them feed themselves is the way to avoid that. And then if you are seeing that baby is doing all that, feeding themselves, and then the breast milk is starting to drop off, you might consider coming to the table a little less frequently for a bit to see if that helps with baby's intake or if they're getting constipated or something like that. But by and large, we trust baby. For the
Yeah.
most part, babies you can be trusted to regulate their own hunger and satiety.
Yeah, I
Great.
think this is an important point too. There's a cultural element to this and generational element to this. It's like raise your hand if you have a grandparent around who gives
Made
advice.
you finish your plate. Yeah.
But I think that's an important, because listen, they say it takes a village, because it really does take a village
Yeah.
to raise a baby. So it is important to have multiple caretakers if you are so blessed to have that, right? But I think helping to kind of balance like maybe what a generation ago thought about how much your child needs, or spoon feeding them or forcing
Yeah.
them to eat, or even culturally, like in my culture, it is, especially with like in the Indian culture, you actually even feed with your hand. And so it is like love, but it's also a sign of like, okay, my baby's eating a lot, so I'm doing a good job. So I just want to be cognizant of, we're talking about the medical research, and then we're talking about like what's intuitive. And then there's a lot of like cultural aspects to food and feeding
Yep.
that can kind of muddy the what you're trying to do.
Great. I want to get to allergies just very quickly. It seems to be a theme tonight. A lot of questions around iron intake when it comes to babies. Can one of you just hit on that before we get to the big hitter?
Oh, where am I?
Yeah, so iron is an important nutrient for baby around 6 months. The reason this comes up is that around 6 months, baby's natural stores of iron start to be depleted. It doesn't mean they run out. And most babies who are fed formula are fed iron formula for iron fortified formula. So a lot of people hear that baby needs iron at 6 months. The reality is baby should be offered iron-rich foods, and you should talk to your doctor, because if your doctor believes that your baby is at a particular risk for having low iron, they will test your baby's iron and then they might recommend a supplement. But baby's job right now is to learn how to eat. So putting pressure on parents to get in iron-rich foods at this age is not a great practice. And what we know is that a lot of babies don't need us to force feed or pressure them to eat extra iron. And again, if they do, that's a sign they need an iron supplement, not necessarily that we need to be pushing them. That said, we offer baby iron-rich foods to hedge our bets. So the best thing we can do is introduce baby to iron-rich foods, give them lots of chances to eat iron-rich foods, and keep those in the diet so that we're making sure that they have the opportunity when they actually figure out how to chew and swallow to get in those iron-rich foods, because their stores are starting to deplete. So it's a good practice. Again, if your doctor is worried about your baby's iron, I would talk to them about whether or not they need an iron supplement, because we want to give baby the chance to learn to chew and eat rather than trying to force them to take in a bunch of iron-rich foods.
That's right. And then we actually check that. Sorry, I've been tag teaming if you see me.
We're all in the same boat over here.
So, and the other thing is those are things that we kind of do routinely in the clinic, based on, so like when your kid is past the baby stage into the toddler stage, one of the things that we will check is kind of hemoglobin, and just to see like how much, if you have low hemoglobin, then we check for iron deficiency, because it's really common when kids are drinking lots and lots of cow's milk and like not drinking anything else. So these are things that we kind of monitor for in general as part of our normal well child checkups.
Got it. One more, and then we will get to allergies, just because Dr. M, I know you love this question. Just tell us a little bit about introducing spices and seasonings to your food.
I love it. I love it. All of it. Like,
do it.
Just do it, because I think that, we do talk about like there are some specific additives, like, adding a bunch of sugar and adding a bunch of like extra salt, like in big loads isn't great, because in general, you're then conditioning baby to have certain tastes, or
Of course.
always wanting like a sugary food or really like salty food. And so their bodies can't necessarily handle that much additional salt load and sugar load. But in general, if you think about, again, zoom out from our day to day, people are introducing kind of the same foods that they are cooking for their family around the world to their children. And so, we use a lot of spices in Indian cooking, and we kind of introduce that. It's really great to explore, is to expand that palate too. And, I always say, it's like, okay, broccoli is fine on its own, but seasoned broccoli actually tastes better like as an adult. And so if you want them to explore different textures, different flavors, all of these different things are, again, a part of practice and exposure.
Got it. I love that. Yeah, I say this often, but we did a nanny share for my first son, and the different households just preparing all different foods and seasoning things in different ways. I really think opened his eyes to new flavors, and he's an awesome eater today. And I really think it was that, mostly the other parent, mom, who did. I'm putting the 9 major allergens in the chat, Kary. I've learned from doing this that we should just have them there. So everybody, the 9 major allergens are in the chat. We are now going to switch gears. I'm going to kick it off with Kary. Just how can parents introduce allergens safely and confidently? And maybe quickly just rattle off the 9 in case people are just listening.
Yeah, I love this. I always fail at this.
You get it right every time, Kary.
I don't know. I sometimes don't.
Yeah.
So if your baby, I mean, the vast majority of food allergies are going to be on one of these 9 foods. And the 9 foods are egg, milk, dairy, or like milk and dairy the same, wheat, soy, peanuts, tree nuts, fish, shellfish, and sesame. So the vast majority of food allergies will be on one of those 9 foods. You can be allergic to other foods. It's just significantly less common than it is on these foods. So these are the foods you're going to be a little bit more cautious with when you introduce them to baby. There's a lot of different ways you can introduce solids, and a lot of people will tell you one food at a time. The research does not support that. You can actually introduce 2 new foods at the same time, or even 3 new foods at the same time, as long as they are not one of these 9 common allergens. You can introduce 2 of the same allergens at the same time if you want, but it's more risky. So we recommend that you don't. So you can introduce a common allergen at the same time as another food that's new but not a common allergen, but you wouldn't introduce 2 common allergens together necessarily. So these 9 foods we want to first and foremost introduce on their own, so separately, and then we want to introduce them early. So by early, the research shows that around the time you start solids, they don't have to be your very first food, but at 6 months, a few days in or a week or so in, you want to get going with your common allergens and start introducing those. There is a small subset of babies who are considered at high risk for developing later food allergies. Those are babies with severe eczema or babies with a pre-existing food allergy, which is often hard to know at 4 months or 5 months. But for those babies who are considered at high risk, the research actually shows that we want to get them started on common allergens, not all solids, but common allergens as early as 4 months. But if your baby doesn't fall into the high risk category, if they do not have severe eczema or a pre-existing food allergy, you would introduce them around 6 months old when you get started in small amounts. Our allergist recommends over the course of 3 days, or you can do 3 times in one day, but you're doing it repeatedly over a few, like 3 times, so that you can watch for those potential allergic reactions, which tend to show up within around 30 minutes to a few hours after ingesting the food. It's usually not like you introduce it in the morning and then they'll have a reaction at night. That's very unlikely. So you'll usually see it quickly. Our allergist recommends introducing the food, waiting about 2 hours to see if there's any type of a response, and then trying again, and then waiting 2 hours, and then trying again. Or if you're nervous, doing it one day, trying again the next day, trying again the third day.
But the magic number is 3.
Yeah, and you're going to do it in gradually increasing amounts. You can see on our app, we'll tell you exactly how much to do. And again, anytime somebody tells you an exact amount, parents get really anxious. It doesn't have to be an exact amount, but what we know is that allergies can be dose dependent. So if your baby eats a lot of that food right off the bat and they have an allergic response, it's more likely to be a big allergic response rather than if they eat a small amount of it.
Got it. And then I'm seeing just multiple questions on this time, but if you have celiac or gluten intolerance, does that put your baby at higher risk for that, Dr. M?
So I was actually going to comment, there's a lot of very specific things in here
I know.
in terms of, like medical conditions and FPI. And I don't want to muddy because I want to make sure that we're doing some like more general stuff, if that's okay.
I know. There's always appetite for this niche stuff. We need to do this twice.
Yes. But I also think it's really important when it comes to medical conditions that you really are talking to your primary care provider. And I say that because I am a primary care provider. And so much of what we can counsel patients on is really specific to your particular child. So it's really hard to do kind of generalized advice, except for like, again, allergies, right? Like in general, introducing food allergens kind of early on decreases the risk of food allergy later in life. So if it's okay, I think it's just important because I only know we have 4 minutes left.
That's completely fine.
And I think it's always a better conversation when it comes to medical conditions to talk directly with your provider. So I'm not trying to punt that. I think it's important.
Great. And for our liability as well.
But I will say
the one
thing that we always, I like to mention, when it comes to allergies, Kary and I, we see a lot of things that aren't really allergies, but actually, food intolerances. And so I think it is important, like kind of like newborn rashes. There's a lot of rashes. Most of it's pretty normal, actually. And then there are ones that you want to look out for. So just really thinking through as your baby is really starting to explore new foods, Food intolerance is really like a digestive problem. It's not a immune response. And so the things that we were talking about with true allergy is an immune response. And so you might get, some skin irritation and, some, just like not feeling well or a little bit fussy. That's really typically like just a food intolerance as opposed to a true food allergy in which your body is creating an immune response, like it's seeing a virus or a bacteria. It's kind of doing an inappropriate, mistakenly inappropriate response to a food that it's seeing. So that's kind of what we think about when we think about allergy.
Mm-hmm. Kary,
Yeah, and
anything just with yeah, go ahead.
well, I was just going to say that the common response to that when people are like, oh, baby had a rash is to pull that food out of the diet. And that's actually potentially harmful because if they are not allergic to that food and you pull that food out of the diet, that's one less food in their diet. And we know that prevention of allergies is dependent on repeat exposure to that allergen. So it's not just that you introduce peanuts once, but that you keep that peanut exposure in the diet around 2 times per week. So if a parent believes baby had a reaction to that because they had a little skin contact rash to something else, and they pull peanuts out, you're actually increasing the risk of developing later allergy.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, great. I see people asking about how and when to introduce allergens. That will be in the recap. We answered that a little bit earlier. Um, Other than calling 911, is there anything else you could do at home for severe allergic reaction? So there's that question. And then somebody was asking, like, should they have Benadryl on hand just in case when starting allergens?
Yeah, these are always hard ones because it really depends on also what age your baby is.
Yeah.
So that's why any of these things. So in general, knowing basic CPR, knowing all of the basic life-saving skills is so important for any parent, whether you're
Yep.
starting, solids or not, because all of these things, airway, breathing, circulation, all of that stuff is applicable to both allergies and choking and gagging. I would call your pediatrician first because they can help you. Like if your child like really does need Benadryl, like these are medications, yes, they're over the counter, but we want to make sure that they're the right dose
Safe.
for your
Yeah.
babies. Exactly. So if you are seeing true like allergy where your baby is having difficulty breathing, if your baby is having what we actually have, like it's called hives, where it's raised and kind of swollen, those are, allergic responses. Those things need an immediate, 911 kind of call
So
or call.
then, I don't know if you can answer this, Dr. M, but just to reiterate, so if it is a rash, do you continue to introduce the food or stop or call your pediatrician and then reintroduce?
I think it depends. Like you can, so the rashes can be a whole separate conversation on its own. But when we really think about allergies, hives, so it's like when you think about like these raised, swollen rash, as opposed to just like a little bit of redness here and there. If you have any concern, though, the easiest thing to do is again pick up the phone, call your pediatrician, see your
Yep.
pediatrician. But I would not go to eliminating food without actually talking to a provider, like Kary said. So I completely agree with that. But that's the
Okay.
difference between kind of a rash with allergies. It's usually raised.
And this is one of my favorite things in our app is just there we have an article that shows you
Yeah.
signs and symptoms of
Best.
allergic reaction. So if you are nervous about this, which I think a lot of these questions just stem from being nervous this is going to
Yeah.
happen, the article will walk you through what to look for. It also has beautiful pictures of skin rashes that are problematic on babies of different skin tones, so you can see
Yeah.
a wide variety of what this might look like, which can really ease your anxiety so that you're prepared with how to respond should you see some of these things.
And
Mm,
I can't recommend the app enough. I have like
it's the best.
it really is such a great resource for all of my patients, for all of our Ahimsa, customers. And so I think those visuals that Kary is talking about, from the rashes to like you have one on choking and gagging to how to cut your food. I think those are really like helpful things to visualize. And that you guys do such a great job on that.
It's literally the best.
Yeah.
I couldn't have done solids without it.
Thanks.
Um, okay, I know there are a lot more questions in the chat. We have done this event before, so what we usually do is follow up with a very detailed recap via email with answers to the questions that come into the chat, plus more. You can also watch the full recording in the Auggie app. We'll email you when it's up and ready. And I think just like Dr. M, Kary, if we can all just like take a collective breath together, just like and know that it's gonna be okay. I more need that right now entering this journey. And we appreciate you spending an hour with us. So thank you, Dr. M. Thank you, Kary. Thank you, everyone who joined, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thank you
Awesome.
all.
Bye,
Thank you. You're doing
everyone.
great,
You're
parents. You're doing
doing
great.
great. You got this.
Yeah.
Bye. And it's messy, and that's normal.
Yes.
Bye.